Welcome into Survivor Analytics, the show that aims to find the perfect Survivor strategy. My name is Clyde. I'm the true expert. With me, as always, is Jack, the voice of the people. Jack, how's it going?
What's up, party people? I thought Clyde had an opener, and he seems to be going pretty middle of the road here.
I'm starting pretty standard because I want to catch the listener off guard. This is a monumental episode for the podcast. This is our 100th episode that we are recording today. Pretty
Hey!
absurd. Almost 2 years of this thing. So I found some Survivor Analytics lore that I wanted to share with you to kind of put
Oh,
everything into
yes.
perspective. So I went
Please.
back and listened to some of the clips from our podcast on Samoa, which was the first season that we covered. And first thing I realized is that I feel like we've come a long way from the very beginning. Some of those are tough listens, but I was just looking for certain clips. So here's some fun stats for you, since we're a
Oh, boy.
statistics-based podcast. Episode 3 marked the beginning of you calling yourself the voice of the people. For the first 2 episodes, you had no title. Episode 3 also marked the origin of What's Up Party People, so a monumental episode in the history of the show.
That's really when we found our form, it sounds like.
Episode 7 is when I got the title of the true expert. And episode 6 is probably my favorite episode title in the history of the show, which is titled The Guy with the Hat. And that's because you did not know Jeff Probst's name at the very beginning, and that's how you
You
described
love
him.
that one. That one absolutely tickles you, which, I think is great. Personally, I'm trying to think if I have a favorite episode title. I'm just looking back now. Everybody Needs to Wipe Their Ass is a pretty good one.
Is that
That was in
Samoa? What
Survivor.
season is that?
That was in Survivor China. Big Toes in the Pseudo Merge. Man, there's some good names in here.
Oh, that's from
But
45, right?
yeah,
That's a
that
D
is from 40.
reference.
Welcome back to Survivor Analytics.
The only other stat I have is I found our least listened to episode. I was searching for the most listened to. Maybe I'll have that by the end of the podcast. Our most listened to one, I think, is the episode where we had Austin come on and talk with us. But our least listened to one is your review of a Young Sheldon episode, which we did as a punishment for Survivor 44 based on winner picks.
Yeah, I feel like there's probably some people, because we're now on Survivor 47, which is crazy. There's probably some people listening who don't realize that at one point we used to have punishments on this show, and we did it one time, and I did it so badly that we ruined the bit. But I was forced to watch a terrible episode of Young Sheldon and review it. So that is in the feed if you want to go find it.
There's a Young Sheldon spinoff now. Have you seen that? It's on, I forget his brother's name, but it's about his older brother and his wife.
Yeah. So now we've gone from the prequel to a spinoff from the prequel. And so at this point, I'm pretty sure there's going to be some side character that develops in that sitcom who turns out to be one of the other guys on Big Bang Theory. And it'll come full circle.
Yeah, how many years are they going to milk that product? Because I think Big Bang Theory came out in like 2007. It's been almost 2 decades now of Big Bang Theory content on CBS.
And Big Bang Theory has been over for a decade, I'm certain, right?
Probably like 6 or 7 years would be my guess.
Big Bang Theory. Wow, it's later than I would have thought. What year do you think the last episode of Big Bang Theory came out?
2018?
2019.
Wow.
The 12th and final season ended in May of 2019.
I also found our most listened to podcast episode, and I was wrong. It was not the Austin feature. It's for the finale.
Feature.
No, it's not the Carrie feature either. It's the finale of Survivor 46. People were dying to know what we thought about the Kenzie win and the Charlie loss.
I mean, that's a pretty great, that's a good episode of our podcast and not a great episode of Survivor in my book. But
let's talk about this episode of Survivor.
Anyway, we're talking about Survivor 47, episode 5. I lost all confidence halfway into that word. What'd you think of this episode? What'd you think of it? We have a twist?
We have a twist. It's not an egregious twist. This is probably my favorite twist that we've seen so far on the season because we weren't removing players' votes. I would say that this episode was incredible for me as an Andy supporter. Since episode 2, Actually, I think in the premiere of this season, I predicted that Annika would be going home because she's serving as this overbearing leader around camp. And fast forward a month, and here I am, once again, correct on the podcast. I'd also note that this is an episode where they easily could have highlighted this vote and this upcoming tribal council as Sierra's big move of the season because she was the one operating the middle between these two sides. And they don't present it that way. They present it as Andy the mastermind, who has now decided to put on glasses in confessionals. So I'm feeling a little bit better about my winner pick this early in the season. I'm not losing hope in Andy.
Honestly, I think Andy deserves some props here. And I had a very different vision for Sierra in mind. I'll say that. And we can talk about this more when we get to it. But I was envisioning a parallel universe where Sierra flips, takes the girls' alliance, the breadwinners, and votes out Sam.
Oh, like
I don't
this
think that-
week or in the future.
like this week. Flips on Sam. I don't think the math works because of Annika, because she didn't have a vote. But I really liked the idea of Sierra flipping on that alliance, genuinely putting Andy on the bottom, and taking after this reward social hour where everybody's going, oh, it's Sam and Sierra, they're the power couple. Her flipping on him going into the merge would be such a power move, right? And maybe it's a power move she wants to save. But I really liked the idea of her coming into the merge without that ally and with that move in her pocket.
We'll dive more
Yeah.
into the move later from
Yeah.
Sam and Sierra's perspective, but I'm down to start with Lavo post-tribal council.
Here's what I'll say. Rome's a baby. I'm sick of it. Like, I have such little tolerance for his antics at this point. The fact that we come back after the vote, Teeny has been blindsided. Rome has dominated yet another vote with his arsenal, his bag of tricks. And yet Rome is the victim, and Rome has to be hugged and apologized to and taken care of after this tribal because he got his feelings hurt because someone wanted to vote him out. Ridiculous. Ridiculous. I was not here for it.
I liked it. I think it's funny
Of
because
course you did.
TD didn't even vote in the previous tribal council. It's not like they voted against Rome. They didn't have a say in
Right.
what went down. So I thought it was funny that Rome kind of went for the jugular here. I feel like in the new era, players are hyper focused on keeping as many strategic options open as possible, which is good strategic play. But I feel like Rome is such a deviation from that, and it's fun to watch. He's like totally comfortable with creating factions within the tribe, and that's not something you see a lot of in these later seasons. So it's refreshing for me. Even though it's not great play, I don't consider Rome a particularly great player of Survivor, but he adds so much to the show. And I do think the clock is ticking on Rome. I'll be talking later in the podcast on who I think are the potential mergatory boots going into next week. But that's really all there is to say with Lavo. Do you want to go to the first big twist of the episode?
Yeah, so the first big twist is that we go straight from the opening credits into a drone shot into a challenge. We're going right into a challenge with 2 lanes set up, only blue and yellow, which I loved this move from production to go, hey, we're going to do a 2-group challenge and we're going to use tribal colors. We're not going to use different shades, right? We're not going to make this an arbitrary thing. We're going to make the tribe that just went to tribal terrified that they're about to get eaten by the other 2 tribes, right? Because you know that's what they're thinking. But no, it's not that. It's just a reward challenge with a new twist. Jeff calls it a twist. They had it in the next time on. I believe the twist is that there's 2 things going on. A fake tribe swap for the challenge, and they're making them cook their own food at the reward. Those seem to be the twists here, because what this challenge is, they draw rocks for 2 teams, not tribes, teams, blue and yellow. The winning team gets to go to Sanctuary, where good things happen, grill their own hot dogs, and just hang out and swap information, have conversations, network outside of their tribe. The losing team, everybody goes home to their respective places. No networking, no food. Did this feel like a twist to you? What part of this felt twisty to you?
It kind of felt like a twist. I think in the new era, I'm so accustomed to these twists being absolutely game breaking that a mild
Mhm.
twist like this was a bit underwhelming. But honestly, this is one of my favorite twists that we've seen in the new era. I like these opportunities for players to form those cross tribal alliances without their votes at stake or without any advantages at stake. I do think it's a little bit annoying because production knows at this point that most Survivor fans want to see a tribe swap going from 3 tribes to 2. It's been a constant complaint in the new era, and it's something that we still haven't seen. We've seen a tribe
Oh,
swap in 45 going from 3 to 3, but never from 3 to 2. So I think
right,
when production set this up, they thought, ooh, we could frame it to make it look like a tribe swap and we could put it in the next time on to get everyone excited and then ultimately
right.
disappoint them. So the way it was presented kind of left very high expectations. But at the end of the day, I am happy with the twist. I liked that they only got 1 hot dog each. I think it would probably be a little bit better if it did not take place at the Survivor Sanctuary. Like in my ideal world, the barbecue for the hot dogs tips over and burns the sanctuary to the ground. But that's just me dreaming too big at this point.
That's such a brutal take on Sanctuary where good things happen, Clyde.
Did you like the
Oh my
sanctuary? I
God.
would way rather them go explore Fiji and go to different spots every time.
I don't care anymore. I wish they would start selling ad space on the Sanctuary walls, you know? So I don't even feel like going over the challenge, but the tribes, or sorry, the teams are Annika, Sol, Rome, Andy, Sierra, Genevieve, and Gabe against Sue, Teeny, Kyle, Sam, Tiana, Rachel, and Caroline. Do I have that right?
Yeah, that's all correct. Which is interesting because
And
that second group you mentioned is almost the entire Tuku tribe. 4 out of the 5 remaining Tuku members are all put in that one group.
that second tribe, second team, goodness, excuse me, wins. I'm not even going to bother recapping the challenge because guess what? They run through a course and they shoot some hoops. This one did so little for me. I have more to say about a little bit more to say about the other challenge, but this one did absolutely nothing.
I agree. Well, challenges normally
Yeah,
do nothing for me anyway. So this is ideal. We can skip past it, go right to
yeah,
Sanctuary. Couple highlights from Sanctuary. The first one is that Tiana publicly throws Gabe under the bus. She says that he played his idol at the previous tribal council and he's just constantly searching for idols. And I like Tiana. I think she's played a solid game up until this point, but I
yeah,
felt like this was just way too aggressive. Just about every other member of Tuku is in that conversation except Gabe himself. I
right.
don't understand if Tiana thought that no one in her tribe would even consider leaking that information back to Gabe. I think she's underestimating Gabe. And in the long term, in that battle between Gabe and Tiana, my prediction right now is that Gabe will come out on top. But how did you feel about Tiana's decision there?
It was a big swing, and I don't hate a big swing typically on the show, but I will say it doesn't feel to me like Tiana has many allies. And part of that is definitely the edit, right? The edits really played up the Gabe and Sue dynamic and not really anyone else. But to play this move when you're looking for friends, putting somebody else down when you're trying to pick people up, I didn't like it. That's risky. Yeah, yeah, I wasn't crazy about it, especially when she feels overconfident in her position on the tribe, in her relationships, right? This immediately rubs Sue the wrong way, obviously. It rubs everybody the wrong way. When they get back to camp, Tiana is essentially strong armed into apologizing to his face, to Gabe's face for what she said, because she has so many people who are willing to work with him or tell him rather than work with her. And her response to that, by the way, is not great, or to follow that storyline through the episode. She is told to apologize. She goes to apologize, and then her apology misrepresents how she spoke and who she spoke to. when Gabe knows the full story. I didn't love it, but I think at the merge she could win out. You know, she could find another alliance that would work out for her. I'm not
Yeah,
writing her off yet.
I'm close to writing her off, to be
Yeah.
honest. To kind of hit on what you were talking about earlier, Tiana tells Gabe that she only leaked that information to a select few people, when in reality, she shared it
Yes.
with the entire group. And I think Tiana telling only two people is the ideal strategic move for her. Like, if she approached
Mhm.
Teeny and one person from the Gada tribe and shared that information, chances are that would spread to the other two tribes and she wouldn't need to publicly declare that information in the same way. But like you said, Gabe eventually catches wind that Tiana was lying to him. And I think there's a real chance that Tiana is the mergatory boot. I feel like if you look at the history of the new era, your mergatory boots are typically those players that are already on the outside of their respective tribes. You'll see
Mhm.
three tribes come together at the mergatory. No one wants to do a flashy play yet. So there's kind of a consensus agreement of, okay, let's just knock out someone that we can all agree to get rid of. And I
Mhm.
have some examples here. In 44, we saw Josh get voted out at the mergatory. He was the guy that was lying about being a personal trainer. In
Yeah, he was
45,
a podiatrist. I remember that so clearly for some reason.
yeah, well, it's because he lied so poorly. He didn't
Yeah.
calculate his timeline correctly with his training to be the personal trainer. So because of
Yeah.
that, no one trusted him and he got voted out at the mergatory. In 45, Jay Maya goes out in that round. She was in a spot where no one on that original Reba tribe really trusted her. And then
Right.
46, we see Mariah go out at the mergatory the round after she was left out of the gem vote. We're getting this trend of these outsiders going home in that round, and I think that could be Tiana. I think the contenders right now for your mergatory boot, and I'll be clipping this later next week when I'm ultimately proven correct. The three
Uh-huh.
contenders for your mergatory boot are Rome from Lavo, Rachel from Gada, and Tiana from Tuco. I think those are the three people that are in rough positions as it currently stands on their tribes, and they're kind of expendable for their groups at the merge.
I mean, I would be shocked if it's not Rome. I think he is such a bad camp presence, and there's enough of him in the next time on that I could see him being an easy, easy boot. I'm president of the Rome Haters Club, so
To kind of give you some points there, we know that when Rome first arrived on the Lavo beach, he immediately started searching for idols, which painted a target on his back. So I wouldn't be surprised if Rome rolls up to the merge beach and does the exact same thing. Well, do you want to pivot off the sanctuary and go to the Tuku tribe, or is there anything else that you want to mention from the Survivor Social?
I mean, a couple other things from the social just to note. You mentioned this earlier. They each get one hot dog. That's hilarious. Um, One hot dog each, a bunch of bottles of soda that they've rebottled in like old fashioned bottles with like the wire stopper. Just take the label off the plastic, it's fine. You know that soda is warm and flat by the time they get to it. Um,
Well, also, I wish they gave them alcohol. I don't know if the players would drink it, but what's the harm in adding some social lubricant to the Survivor Social?
yeah. The only other thing I had was the Sam slash Sierra bond is very much still in the conversation, in the public perception. Not by anything they're doing, but just by the fact that their names have been linked and it's slowly making its way around the island. Just worth noting, Sam takes it personal, and it's part of the big storyline of the episode, right? Is how there's this secret trio and a very public duo, right, in that alliance. So that's all I've got. To go to
Yeah.
Tuku.
I'll just say with the Sam and Sierra situation, this is like the third week in a row where the edit is highlighting that pair as a threat. And
Yeah.
you can kind of interpret this different ways. Maybe you can interpret it as we're going to identify this pair as a dynamic duo and they're going to run the post merge, which could happen. I feel like Sam gets so
Mhm.
much screen time that I wouldn't be surprised if he makes a really deep run. But I think
Yeah.
it's more likely that one of them gets sacrificed in the early merge. And it pains me to say this because Sierra's on my fantasy team and I think she's played a phenomenal game in the pre merge. but I think she's the
Yeah.
one that's more likely to be the sacrificial lamb of that group. I just don't see a world where Sam, given all the content he's received through this point in the season, that he goes out that early, even though he's a meat boy. Like on
Yeah.
paper, I think Sam is the one that seems more likely to go out in that stage of the game. But when you consider the surrounding edit, I think he's going to last longer than Sierra. But we can go over to Tuku. We talked about the Tiana Gabe dynamic. And I also want to talk about this entire situation from the perspective of Carolyn, because Carolyn is the one who, first, has barely been on our screens this season, and second, she's the player that convinces Tiana to go and apologize to Gabe. Like, Carolyn's goal here is to enter the merge as a cohesive Tuku tribe, which could
Right.
happen. I feel like there's less divisions in that tribe, especially when you compare it to a group like Lavo, where
Mhm.
Rome is just creating chaos. I also worry that from Carolyn's perspective, after the immunity challenge, they'll be going into the Mergatory with the numbers advantage. So there's a real chance that the other two tribes want to knock out a Tuku contestant in order to even up the numbers. So I think there's value in creating that cohesion, but that might only take you so far. Any thoughts on this from Carolyn's perspective?
It's definitely weird to have your first moment on the show be kind of playing the social sheriff, if you will. I'll be honest. It took me quite a while to actually write down her name because I had to wait for a confessional where it had her name in the Chiron, right? Yeah, I don't know. In terms of tribal unity going into the Mergatory, you can't fake it. And she's trying to fake it. If you're having to organize apologies, quote unquote, between your tribe mates, you're not cohesive going in.
I can give another take on tribal cohesion here too,
Please.
where I
Yes.
wonder if it's actually bad to go into the merge appearing as a cohesive unit. Like we saw in 46, a large reason why Mariah goes home at the Mergatory is because there was this general perception that, oh, the Siga tribe is very tight knit. I think the
Right.
group that goes on the Mergatory feast, the Siga members there don't want to throw one of their own under the bus, and that kind of incentivizes everyone else to target them. So
Right.
it could actually be a positive thing to have a little bit of division. That way, the other tribes think, oh, we don't need to break up the Tuku members now. They will be willing to go for their own down the line.
Clyde, I think that's an incredibly great take from you. I feel like we need a segment or a list somewhere to preserve the Survivor Analytics top tips. And I think not portraying a cohesive tribe as cohesive to the rest of the island at the merge is a great idea. Because then, oh, they're fragmented. Let's try to work with them. Let's bring them in. Let's work alongside them to go after the more cohesive tribe. And then, nope, guess what? Gotcha. I think that's fantastic.
It only works though if the group itself is actually cohesive, because there's so many tribes that will enter the merge who despise each other and they end up self-imploding. Like we saw it
Mhm.
with Bello in 45, where Bruce was such a chaotic figure in that group that they all turn on each other at the merge, which allows the Reba players to dominate the game in the second half. Like it's only
Yeah.
worth it to appear non-cohesive if you're actually tight knit at your core. But
Yes.
speaking of chaotic tribes, we can talk a little bit about Lavo here. We mentioned
Yeah.
Rome's antics earlier, but he gets even more chaotic in the second half here. For the past couple weeks, Rome has kind of bullied Saul to a degree. He's been following him around the island, making sure that he doesn't find an idol. But this week, Rome takes a complete 180, and he decides that I now want to align with Saul and target Teeny. He approaches Saul with some valuable information, which is all true. He tells him that Teeny has an amulet that they kept secret from him. He tells him that Genevieve does not want to work with him in the long run. I wanted to get your thoughts here on Rome kind of taking a different approach with Saul and being honest with him for really the first time this season.
That's an interesting way to describe this because what I saw wasn't exactly Rome being honest with Saul. It was Rome deciding to try to play everybody because Rome goes to Saul and tells him everything, right? He does. But it includes a bunch of stuff that his other ally, Genevieve, didn't want Saul to know. He tells Saul that Genevieve doesn't want to work with Saul. He tells Genevieve that Saul doesn't want to go for Teeny or something along those lines. He starts getting his own wires crossed. There's 4 people in this tribe, and an alliance of 2 is pretty damn valuable. I got confused, and honestly, Rome is so all over the place here that the biggest effect he has, in my understanding, is to bring Genevieve and Saul together. I don't think anything about what Rome's doing because I don't think he knows what he's doing. Also, Genevieve points this out. Rome is acting like they've just lost an immunity challenge and they're going to tribal in 3 hours. They're not. They're going to go to bed. They're safe. But it's overplaying. It is a level of urgency 24 hours ahead of a 4-person tribal. I mean,
See,
I know I'm very low on Rome, but that's crazy. Like he's so amped up here that it's going to be his downfall.
I don't think this is overplaying on Rome's part. At this point in the season, there's been 4 immunity challenges, and Lavo has lost 2 of them. They've proven themselves as the weakest tribe from a physical perspective. And now there is just a reward challenge where only Teeny gets food and the other 2 tribes are fueling up. Rome doesn't know the quantity of hot dogs provided at the Survivor Sanctuary. So in his mind, he might be thinking, we're already losing these challenges. They could be getting a feast over there at Sanctuary. Things might not be looking good right now for the upcoming immunity. I need to start putting the pieces on the board to make sure that the vote goes my way. And I agree that I think he's a little bit over aggressive, especially with his conversation with Genevieve. But as it pertains to his conversation with Saul, I think that in Survivor, timing is so important. We later see Andy reintegrate into the majority of Gada, and I think that's primarily due to the time between their first tribal council and their second tribal council, where Andy had 4 episodes to build those bonds and reintegrate himself. For Rome,
well said.
It's only been like 3 days since he was blatantly targeting Saul at camp. So I think it's just too early right now to have those strategic discussions with him. You need to take that time to build the relationship, which I understand is difficult given that it's a 26-day season. So I think the issue here was more so the timing of the move rather than the move itself. But you hit on this earlier where after all of Rome's wires get crossed, he now appears on the bottom of that tribe. And I wanted to get your thoughts on this from Genevieve's perspective. Up until now, Genevieve has been completely loyal to Rome. They've kind of walked in step the entire season. So do you think it's the right time for Genevieve to target Rome, outside of personal bias, outside of your thoughts on Rome as a TV character?
If I was Genevieve, I would not want to be walking into the Mergatory with Rome because, as we see in this section, he doesn't know when to keep his mouth shut. If I'm Genevieve, I don't want Rome tying himself to me really blatantly. I don't want to be, there's Sam and Sierra and Rome and Genevieve. I don't want to be perceived as a duo with the esports commentator who is the best at everything and could have gone to the NBA if only he'd been taller and ever played basketball. Or he could have been a rapper if he had ever tried to rap, or he could have been a physicist. He thinks he's the greatest at everything. I don't want to be inherently linked with that guy in the other 16 people's minds, or what? It's not 16, but you know what I'm saying. I think trying to get Rome out now is way better than trying to get Rome out at the Mergatory, because there's a huge difference between trimming one of your own numbers when you've got other people preying on you, right?
Yeah.
And so if I was Genevieve, I would have considered throwing this challenge, getting Rome out.
Throwing the challenge with 4 people and going into the Mergatory with just 3? I feel like that's a bit aggressive. And you throwing a challenge out of all people is absurd to me.
That's how much I dislike Rome.
It took 100 episodes for you to go down on challenges and be willing to throw one, but we finally made it. I bet if I went to episode 1, Jack, and told him that, hey, the future version of you would want to throw a challenge, that older version of Jack would gasp in fear.
Yeah, and disgust. Yeah. No, you know what? The older version would go 100 episodes.
We're still doing
100?
that? I think that having Rome as your sacrificial lamb could be valuable going into the merge. Like, I think a Rome
That's fair.
character is valuable if you're entering the merge with the numbers advantage. But if Genevieve was going to target Rome, I feel like last week was the time to do it. That's everything I want to cover before the immunity challenge. We can do all the Gata stuff after if you're okay with that.
Oh yeah. Let's focus on Gata afterwards, but let's go to the challenge. Before we go to the challenge though, Gata brings their chickens and they want to make a trade. They're here to offer Jeff some chickens because you know what Jeff Probst needs? 3 chickens. They say, "Hello, Jeff." And he says, "Why have you brought chickens to my challenge?" And they say, "Please take them back and give us 24 eggs." And Jeff says, "No, that's an insane amount of eggs." And he says, "I'll give you 15." And they say, "How about 20?" And he says, "How about 18?" And they say, "Great." And somehow they've managed to buy eggs essentially for free because they didn't eat a single thing from these chickens. I think they say there were 3 eggs and they were all smashed before they got to them. They hate these chickens, but not enough to kill and eat them. And so if I were Jeff, I would say, nope, deal with those chickens for the rest of this season. What did you think of this scene? Because this was kooky and fun, but also a little bit like, really, we're going to do this?
I thought it was fun. I think Jeff got fleeced in the deal. My real concern with this chicken segment is that it just deviates so much from old school Survivor. In those old
Yeah.
school seasons, there was such a dilemma around what are we going to do with the chickens? Are we going to kill them? Are we going to let them lay eggs? Because there's always one person on the tribe that's morally opposed to it, and it creates this ethical dilemma for the entire cast. But I feel like in modern Survivor, players are way more game focused, and they realize that it's not worth it to fight with someone who doesn't want to kill the chickens. We'll just appease them and make the deal with Jeff anyway. So it was a little bit sad for me. It felt like we were closing the book on a chapter of Survivor history. Like maybe production will bring back the chickens in the future.
Who was it that got in trouble for trying to pocket some rice earlier this season?
Rachel.
Rachel. Did she get voted off or is she still on the show?
She's still there. She was the only one left out of the Annika boot this week.
Okay, that was Rachel. Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you. If I was Rachel in this moment, and if Rachel was on a different tribe and she got in trouble for taking a little bit of rice when these people were able to exchange their non-productive chickens for a ton of eggs, I'd be furious. The actual challenge. Oh wait, let's take a break because a chicken pecked one of the contestants. Now let's continue because that was a cute moment in the edit. Basically the challenge, drag a net, pick up a bunch of coconuts and sandbags, and then this is the interesting part. Throw sandbags at a puzzle, destroy it, and then rebuild it. This is an exercise in futility and a meditation on the uselessness of humanity. Like, what are we doing here? Go destroy this thing and then build it back up again after walking a while with some coconuts. It's not even a good puzzle. It's just blocks. I didn't love this one, but I did think it was kind of interesting at the same time in a mocking sense. Like it felt like production has gotten to the point with the puzzles where they hate us, the fans who care about puzzles. And they're like, you know what? We gave you the cool fire one. You weren't excited enough, Jack. Here's one that's just a wall. And we're going to make them destroy it first and then build it again. How do you like that? I don't. I don't like it.
I think it could have been better if it was the season's logo instead of the bat-themed puzzle. That's the only thing that could have made this challenge better for me.
Oh, that would make it better for you? You just want to see the logo again?
I've given up on new era challenges at this point, so I'm kind of buying into them just recycling things. I would love it if they put up the puzzle and it was the 46 logo instead of the 47 logo, because production just realized, oh man, we got the wrong one from the back. Highlights from this challenge for me. Andy uses the wrong side of the blade, which causes the Gata tribe to get behind. I absolutely love this. it kind of goes along with the entire storyline of everybody underestimating Andy. And when he wins the season and people put together compilation clips for him, that will definitely be in there.
Yeah.
And it's a photo finish at the very end between Lavo and Gata. We get a moment of Saul tripping over his own 2 feet running to the platform, but he still gets there. And Rome is left in tears at the very end. And I'm sure you were crying along with him.
I skipped it.
You skipped his crying segment?
I genuinely fast forwarded through Rome's emotional response to his win because I'm so tired of him. I will say props to Gata for their rally. They were so far behind that Jeff is starting to say, oh, it looks like we're wrapping it up. And they managed to come back literally to the last second. Like Clyde said, photo finish. It comes down to who is standing on their little mat first, which is crazy. Good stuff from Tuku because they, were well ahead. So Kyle and Gabe really showing their challenge beastness. I feel kind of bad when we have a tribe like that because they perform so well that it's not even interesting because the incompetence of the other tribes ends up taking all the screen time. Gata's going to tribal.
We have Gata going to tribal, and the big decision here is who will go home. Oh, we got an animal shot, right? Yeah, go ahead.
I can't believe you knew what I was going to say, Clyde. That's so sweet.
I saw the birds in the episode, and I think I wrote down, I got to mentally prepare for the animal shot that's going to come. Okay, what's this one represent?
It's our old friend, the Pacific Reef Heron. It's the friend of the show, the Pacific Reef Heron. When I pulled up the Wikipedia page, because I was trying to figure out what kind of bird it was, I already had it saved in my Wikipedia saved articles because I've looked at the Pacific Reef Heron before.
Oh, we've covered this one? And an animal shot in the past?
We've covered this bird before. Yes.
This is great.
Exactly.
Production is gunning for you. They're recycling challenges and they're recycling the animal shots now.
I do think it's worth pointing out. I think we saw the Pacific Reef Heron in Cook Islands because I'd have to go back and look at my honorable mentions. I think I gave this bird and its cataloger, whose name I don't remember, but I think I gave that German dude an honorable mention over the summer for Cook Islands. And so shout out to the Pacific Reef Heron. But basically, the animal shot is these 2 birds representing, of course, the 2 people on the chopping block tonight, Annika or Andy.
And when I realized that Annika and Andy were the primary targets, I immediately knew that production was salivating for that opportunity in Tribal Council to show someone writing down a name where they put the A and the N and then they fade away from the shot to leave you in suspense. With this vote, Sierra is operating the middle. Sierra is sitting in the power seat here. But the edit would not let you think that. The edit presents this as Andy the mastermind because he wants to build up this perception of himself as the bottom feeder of Gata. He goes to Rachel and Annika and says, I'll take any plan that you want at this point. Just tell me who to vote for. And he knows that the 2 of them will throw Sam under the bus. So once he gets that information, he can then leak it back to Sam, which further incentivizes Sam to keep him around. So say what you want about Andy's challenge performance. I can't really defend him there, but it seems like he's making correct reads at this stage of the game.
It'll be interesting to see if he keeps going in this line of reasoning or trying this play, because I liked this play this week, and if he tries it again, it won't work. And so if he can continue to adapt, deserves a ton of credit. But for this week, it was a good move. I cannot fault it. I liked it.
I would also throw out a positive outlook for Andy moving forward is the potential for Sierra to be a target due to that perceived duo of Sam and Sierra. Like if Sierra gets knocked out in the early merge, then who is Sam going to turn to? And it'll be his pawn in the game in Andy.
His best buddy. Yeah.
With this decision, I wanted to get your perspective on what is the best move for Sierra here, because she's really the one calling the shots.
I mean, I floated this earlier, right? I liked the idea of a Sam blindside. That would be a 2-2, right? That she could then hopefully get him out. It's such an odd edit right? Because I wanted to see so much more from Sierra in this moment, right? This is the breaking point of her pivotal spot. This is the last chance she has to be at the middle of 2 3-person alliances. Then we get all that Andy stuff. And so I don't know. Andy plays well. I'm not trying to fault that, but I really would have liked more from Sierra. I wanted the Sam blindside. I was so convinced it was coming that I wrote down Sam whenever I was tallying the votes. Like I had
Really?
made a row for Sam. I
I
was
feel like there
convinced it
was
was
no
happening.
indication of a Sam blindside going into tribal. I thought Andy and Annika were the only two realistic options on the board.
That's what makes it a blindside. I was like, they'll blindside everybody. Here's what I'll say. And I think maybe this was a deciding factor for Sierra. Annika seems way too complacent for somebody who doesn't have a vote in a 5-person tribe. There's no margin for error. You have to know that somebody in your alliance is in trouble, assuming that Andy really is on the bottom. And I think that lack of vision from her and lack of proactivity to defend herself, given that she doesn't have a vote, like compare Annika to Teeny, right? And how active Teeny was in figuring out the strategy, having the conversations last week, even without any contribution to the bottom line. You see all of that and you go, okay, I think Sierra did the right thing because look at our other alliance and look how much Andy is playing. Would you rather have someone willing to play or someone willing to sit back and trust their numbers? Probably the
Yeah,
person willing to play. So I think it's the right call.
I go back and forth on this. I think the ideal outcome for Sierra is an Andy elimination over an Annika one. I think the
Mhm.
major wrench thrown into this tribal council is the fact that Sam holds an idol that's only valid for one round. So there is a risk there where if Sierra decides to align with the Breadwinners Alliance and she targets Andy, Sam could
Mhm.
play that idol on Andy and knock out one of the women anyway. And then Sierra's in a
Right.
position where she goes into the post merge and she's now burned her closest ally in the game in Sam. I think the ideal move for her, which is very difficult because you basically need to operate under the assumption that Sam is not playing this idol. The ideal move is to knock out Andy. And a major reason for that is that perceived tightness between Sam and Sierra. For me, I think Sierra needs to set herself up with other strategic options when she goes into the merge. I think
Yeah.
she could still walk in there with Sam as someone that she could work with. Sam would probably be a little bit mad at that point that she flipped on Andy, but he wouldn't have many other options at that point. But at least that way, she could sacrifice Sam in the early merge and she would have these two other women to work with down the line. The only other risk I would note there of knocking out Andy is Sierra would essentially be putting her flag in the sand and saying, I'm working with Annika and Rachel, but she's number 3 in that alliance. Annika and Rachel seem attached at the hip. Whereas if she
Yes.
aligns with Sam and Andy, the primary alliance there is herself and Sam with Andy on the outside.
I would add she's also got a strong relationship with Andy, right? The whole him giving up his shot in the dark thing, right? And
I wanted to
so
mention that. Does Andy give her his shot in the dark?
I don't remember seeing it change hands, but he was willing to.
I remember he mentioned that a couple episodes back, but I don't think he actually gave her the shot in the dark beforehand. I'm hoping that we get some more information going into next week because if Andy
Yeah.
gave her that die before tribal council, then I think the move is contextualized. And Sierra feels that, okay, I already have a tight alliance with Sam, and now I have physical evidence that Andy trusts me as well. If I were in her shoes, I probably would have voted out Annika because it's just the safer move at this point in the season. But I think the
Mhm.
ideal outcome is for Andy to go home. You good to go to tribal council?
Yeah. I don't have any notes except for after the vote is read. So do you
I
have
have one
anything
vote.
at tribal?
I've one note, and it's the
Yeah.
most badass voting confessional line that we've seen in a while. I think Andy was cooking
I
this
know
one up months before he went out on the island. He
dude, I
holds
knew
up
you were going to
Annika's
bring this
name
up.
and he says, I've been burying you for the last 10 days. Here is your headstone. A chef's kiss to Andy. He's giving Annika an epitaph on the show. This is why he's my winner pick. We think alike. Great minds think alike. I have no regrets with Andy. I completely regret every negative thing that I said about him in the premiere.
He's having fun with it. That's for sure. I mean, honestly, there's a part of me that wonders if he hadn't dropped this bar, would the edit have focused on Sierra's choice instead of his strategic move? Right? Did
No.
that did this bar justify for the edit them going back and saying, all right, let's showcase all the work he put in, not the work she put in, so that it's even more satisfying in the end? But not to say that he didn't put in work, but the narrative arc of building, 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 and mic drop is definitely better.
But we get our vote. It's a 3-1. 3 on Annika, 1 on Andy. The only vote against
Yep.
Andy comes from Rachel. So, important note here is that Sam does not play the immunity idol. It was only valid for one tribal council. So I wanted to get your thoughts on why did Sam choose to pocket that here?
Souvenir. Take it home.
You think it's
That's
that
it.
simple?
Yeah, he felt good. He felt confident. He'll be able to say, if he makes it to the end, yeah, I was in such a good spot that when I had an idol that I could only use once, I felt so good that I didn't use it.
I think he didn't play it because he never revealed that idol to Andy as far as we know. At the end of the day, I think if Sam played that idol on Andy, could Andy really be mad about that? Like, yes, he could say, oh, you never trusted me enough to share it with me, but you still saved him at tribal council.
Andy's unstable. Andy had a breakdown over coconut chopping. Imagine his closest ally revealing that he used the beware advantage that Andy didn't take. That's exactly what it is. I think you are spot on. Clyde, you've got some good takes this week.
But at the same time, like, everyone else on that tribe, including Rachel, knows about that immunity idol. Like, Sam found it with the rest of Gata except for Andy. So Rachel could easily go to Andy starting next week and say, hey, Sam found this beware advantage and he never told you about it. So I feel like that information is going to spread one way or the other. And from Sam's perspective, by playing that idol on Andy, he would essentially guarantee his way at that tribal council.
Maybe we can get Sam on the show and ask why he didn't play it, because I think there's some contending, compelling options here in a couple different directions.
And we'll see. Maybe that idol will come into play in the future if Sam can knock out Rachel soon enough and kind of suppress that information on the idol. He could use it as a fake in the post-merge. There's a lot of potential there with that thing, but I think the Rachel factor kind of messes it all up. But we didn't even talk about Annika and her reaction when she gets voted out.
I want to say this. There's too much post-vote talking. I feel like we've had several votes where the person is voted out and they kind of sit there for a moment and they do some hugging, they do some talking, they do some look backs and like, good vote, or in Annika's case, wow, I can't believe you guys. Too much of it.
I like the reactions once you're voted out. It adds to that cutthroat side of the game because she was genuinely shocked. When Sam and Andy wave to her, she completely dismisses them, and then she starts crying on the way out.
Immediately.
It adds to that rawness of the game, which I really appreciate. My issue is with the strategic discussions after you're voted out. I don't think Annika should be able to look and ask Rachel, did you vote for me? Because in my mind, Annika's out of the game. Her game does not end when the torch is snuffed. Her game is ended when Jeff holds up the final vote. And I think Asia does something similar 2 episodes back. She asks if Saul voted for her in her elimination. So that's my only issue, because what would stop Annika from turning around and saying Sierra holds an idol or adding information to the game that is like strategically related? So I think you should be able to say goodbye. You can insult the other players. You can have personal conversations, but you shouldn't be able to bring in anything strategic at that point.
I think this is the funny difference between you and I's perspectives on this show is I am so, what's the right word here? I'm so inflexible about the emotional components. I don't care about the letters from home. I don't care about the walk they do at the end. I don't care about any of that sort of stuff, right? I don't care about do I feel bad for Annika in this moment? Absolutely. Do I want to watch the drawn out shock thing? No. And you're like, oh yes, give me more. Yum, 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 yum. But then you're the strategy guy at the same time. It's so funny to me. I think Carrie, friend of the show, said that she stands there like with her mouth open like a scarecrow or something. No, a buffering NPC, jaw literally dropped, is what Carrie said. Here's what I'll say to Annika's discredit. You didn't have a vote this week. You shouldn't be this surprised that it went this way. And I think she's reaping what she sowed by not really working at camp in the last 5 hours before that vote. If she'd had a few more conversations, she might have been able to pick up what was going on in the wind. Maybe not do anything about it, but at least come to terms with it.
Some people might say after this episode that Annika went home because she lost her vote. I don't think that's true because the numbers still could have fallen in her favor. I think Annika's real mistake is the same mistake that you and the rest of America made after the premiere in underestimating Andy. I think that's where she really went wrong. No, I would never. In the first episode, I said that Annika would go home before him. I never doubted.
You did say that. You did.
But she never thought that when she left Sam behind to babysit Andy, that there might be a friendship that builds between the baby and the babysitter. She was very locked into that dynamic of the core four with Andy on the outside. And to be fair, I think if Gada attended the first tribal council of the season and then the second tribal council of the season, Andy probably gets voted out. So sometimes there is that circumstantial component.
Like you said earlier, that the temporal space did him a world of good.
I'm good to go to winners and losers, though, if you are.
Yeah, who's your loser?
My loser this week. A couple people were up for contention for me. I really considered Rachel as she lost her closest ally in the game. I felt like that was too easy, and I instead rolled with Tiana. I don't like the move by Tiana to throw Gabe under the bus in front of the entire Tuku tribe. She didn't lie particularly well in apologizing to Gabe, and as it stands right now, my prediction for the Mergatory boot is Tiana, so she's my loser for the week.
My loser is Rome.
For the third week in a row?
Apparently, which means I'm not good at gauging these things, but he is such a massive presence, and he has no friends left on the island. I could see him being a very, very easy sacrifice at the Mergatory. Easier than Tiana, right? Because with Tiana, I could see somebody else on Tuku having to offer her up and show weakness, where Rome, nobody likes. No one has to say, I guess we could give up Rome. Everyone's like, all right, let's just get rid of him. Like he's already idol hunting.
I'll also note that there was a secret scene released by CBS this week that was called, I think the Aqua Mamba was the title of it. And it was some sick Rome fishing segments, very reminiscent of Ozzy from Cook Islands. Rome compares himself to Ozzy in that same segment. I'll send you the link. It's worth a watch. I only watched it, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12 times. Going on to winners, I'm giving my winner to someone that needs some emotional support. He likes having others praise him when he opens coconuts. My winner goes to Andy, the king of Gada. After the premiere, he put on the glasses, he started running the math, and now he knows what to do on that tribe. This is a great episode for him. More so based on the edit than the actual outcome, if that makes sense. I've said this a bunch of times, but the fact that the edit presents this as Andy's strategic move gives me hope for him in the long run. I think his floor on the season is like 7th place, and I genuinely think that his ceiling is winning the entire thing. Granted, I think there's also a very strong possibility that Andy is your 0 vote finalist, given all of the dodo moments in the edit, but I'm feeling way better about his long-term trajectory after this week.
I mean, I think it's fair. I think it's a fair read. My winner, in a similar vein, is Sierra. I think even with this vote closing one of her doors a little bit, I think going into the Mergatory, she still has connections to all 3 of her fellow tribe mates. She's very, very close with 2 of them. I don't see Rachel fully jumping ship. There's an instinct at the Mergatory to, even with other bad blood, there's an instinct to stick with what you know, right? And for Rachel, that's Sierra. So I think that's a good position of power. I think depending on what Andy decides to do at Mergatory, how he decides to present himself, there could be a hierarchy where Sierra finds herself nicely in the middle of the Gata members. And I like that.
I've been very impressed with Sierra's game up until this point. I
Yeah.
would love it if Sierra went on to win the whole thing, given that she's also on my fantasy team. Quick dishonorable mention to the chicken dilemma. I mentioned this earlier, but I think we are past the point in Survivor history where we'll get a lot of time in the edit focused on what are we going to do with the chickens? Are we going to cook them and eat them, or are we going to let them lay eggs? I think players are way more passive right now in that decision, which makes sense given the progression of the game, but it's also a little bit sad considering that the original intention of the show was that you have these people, you throw them on the island, and you give them this voting dynamic, and they need to survive together. And now that survival element just isn't that important in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, fair enough. My honorable mention is the complaint tablet to Ea Nasir, which is a clay tablet that was sent to the ancient city of Ur in about 1750 BCE. This is the oldest known written receipt or complaint. This is a tablet that was written by a guy who basically was pissed off by this Ea Nasir because a copper salesman had sold him substandard copper. And basically, it's the oldest known documentation of trade or receipt or complaint, however you want to phrase it.
Yeah, the world's first Karen, if you will.
You could put it that way, or you know what? You could say it's the world's first Sam and Sierra and Andy and Annika and Rachel. Because guess what? They're trying to give their chickens back, and this guy was trying to give his copper back. So that's how I got to that.
Okay.
But
I was curious how we were going to get from point A to point B.
I was literally looking at the negotiations, and I was like, Survivor's trying to rebuild human society, right? There it is. Ancient Babylon, ancient Mesopotamia, the grassroots of all society.
My guess was that the complaint was going to be not from the Gada tribe to Jeff, but from you to production for the challenges and for Rome. I thought you were going to
Oh,
be
no,
the one
no.
delivering the complaint in this analogy.
See, before I started to research it, I thought it was a receipt more than it is a complaint, but it is mostly a complaint. And so I was looking for the oldest known receipt. It just turns out it's also a little complaining.
I'll also say that it's a bit of a negative tone for an honorable mention. I feel like that might fit a little bit into the dishonorable category, but I'll
My
still log
honorable
it.
mention is history, is cuneiform, the oldest form of writing. Mergatory next week.
Yeah, big week
Good
next
stuff.
week. We're still determining what we're going to do for next week's episode. Jack and I both have some other obligations. So maybe we'll release some kind of snippet with each of our thoughts on it. Maybe we'll have two completely new people lead the podcast and talk about it. Or maybe there will be just nothing. So you'll be on the edge of your seat, just like we are, waiting to see who goes home at the Mergatory.
But regardless, we'll see you for the merge.